Okay, so hi, I'm Baz Edmeades, and I put up a post on Facebook yesterday about the disappearance of the northern white rhinoceros, the death, at any rate, of the last male of that species. And in that post, I suggested that the imminent disappearance of Asia's two-horned, little hairy two-horned rhinoceros might even, for reasons I've mentioned there, be a bigger tragedy. The northern white rhino is a subspecies. The two-horned Sumatran rhinoceros is an absolutely unique species which has no close relatives. I was truly overwhelmed by the response I got to this video, and a number of the comments were so heartfelt, and the questions asked were so interesting that I decided to make a short video to try and answer some of those questions and comment on some of your reactions. So hopefully you'll view it and maybe even enjoy it. So let's Nick, why don't we start with Lisa Middleton's comment, which it just stays with me. You know, she feels terrible about the situation. She doesn't know whether humans are actually hateful. She suspects that she likes individual humans, but she may hate humanity for causing this extinction. And maybe that's a good place to begin.
Okay.
Here's what I'm thinking there. I wrote a book on this topic and tried to deal with this very question. And I came to a disconcerting conclusion, is that we're really, in a sense, not at fault for causing these extinctions. Not that they're trivial things, they're extremely tragic, but the ecology doesn't ask us to be careful with nature. You know, like a leopard, if a leopard is lame and it can't catch its prey, it can't write a letter to some guy. It can't bring a doctor's note saying it has, say, a lame paw, or and so they get free bits of impala, free bits of gazelle. No, you. So and I was reading a poem the other day by Dylan Thomas, a famous poem. It starts, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light," and I'm thinking, the ecology expects each and every one of us to rage. And the ecology almost says to us, rage, rage against the workings of the ecology. Because the ecology is what keeps biodiversity happy and growing. And the ecology worked fine for the first, until about, say, 15,000 years ago. The ecology worked just fine.
Although there were already signs of it becoming out of kilter 15,000 years ago, weren't there?
There were. You're so right. In Africa, Homo erectus was already exterminating large beasts,
right.
Because of its discoveries of fire and thrown weapons of various kinds.
Right.
But okay, so let's say that. So what did I use in my book? I don't want to quote myself; it sounds pretentious. But I said the ecology works. The ecology displays tender solicitude towards biodiversity, and uncaring, cruel attitude towards individuals. It is by being cruel to individuals that it can be kind to biodiversity and to the biosphere as a whole.
Right.
So this is a disconcerting picture. If you were a human or woman 200,000 years ago, you're going to be losing 3 out of your 5 children on average.
Right.
And that's what, it's not nice to think of, but that's what made Africa a beautiful Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
But the ecology doesn't say to that woman, relax, reconcile yourself to this, it's all for the good of the... It says, rage, rage against the workings of the ecology.
Right.
And so what I'm thinking is that every animal rages against the workings of the ecology. There's a wonderful video on YouTube of some gazelles jumping across a road, and a leopard makes an impossibly high leap, quite impossible, but somehow manages to get one or two claws into one of the impalas, and guess what? It has staved off the workings of the ecology for another day. If she's in milk, she's got milk for her cubs,
right,
and it's all good.
Yeah.
Of course, the impala experiences something very negative.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a little bit about Buddhism. I've always found a great affinity with the Buddhist idea that life is primarily suffering. And it's very recently that we've stopped losing children at an enormous rate. I think of Charles Darwin's commiserating letters to his friend Joseph Hooker,
Mm.
and both of them having lost a child, and how they feel about it.
Mm.
And these were the elite,
Mm.
the financial and intellectual elite in England at the time.
Right.
The poor people were losing children at a disconcertingly higher rate.
Mm. Mm.
And even then, the population was growing by leaps and bounds. So you can imagine how strictly the ecology kept us from growing out of bounds, 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So, Nick, I've just been thinking about what I said about raging against the workings of the ecology. I'm talking about a wilderness ecology, and I'm talking about a member of a wilderness ecology here. In other words, we, say, 500,000 or even 1,000,000 years ago. Right now, I don't for a moment suggest that we rage against. I'm saying that we have to now work against our own extinction, our own power to exterminate animals. I'm not. I couldn't help listening to Stormy Daniels speaking to Donald Trump in their hotel room at the celebrity golf tournament a decade or so ago, and they're watching a video on sharks, and he says, "I hate sharks. I wish they all die." No, I'm not. No, I'm not talking about accepting things of that kind at all. Now, even Jordan Peterson, who I am a great fan of, and he's also bright. But he says, he's talking the other day about, in one of his videos about population growth, he says, well, we're going to grow some more, and that's not such a bad thing. Of course, we're going to exterminate all animals the size of humans or larger. But, tigers eat children, so it's kind of rough having them around. No, absolutely not. Tigers are a part of a forest which ultimately keeps the headwaters of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra intact. And rather than have muddy ditches which can no longer produce anything for us, we have to be a bit more aware than Peterson in that regard. So I'm
I think we
speaking.
saw that experiment play out in the reintroduction of wolves into the Yellowstone National Park, the impact that they make on the biosphere.
Yeah, they altered the entire course of the river and increased diversity enormously. So no. So when I say the ecology never expected us to do anything but rebel against it, that was the wilderness ecology in which we grew up. And I guess that's the kernel of my argument here. What I'm really saying is that it's not our fault that we've achieved this great power. It is not. And it's mysterious power. I mean, John Tooby and Leda Cosmides call it ontogenetic innovation. They say it's just a fancy way of saying that other animals have to innovate phylogenetically. That means they've got to, like if cats want to cut meat, they've got to evolve sharp back teeth. And if they want to penetrate meat, they've got to evolve sharp canines. And so these sharp carnassial teeth of theirs take millions of years to come about. But, when we started awakening to this great intellectual awakening of ours happened in Africa about 1.5 million, or a bit more than, well, it was more than that we started simply manufacturing tools that could both penetrate and cut meat very efficiently.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that the Africa's 3 saber-toothed cats became extinct. Whereas the saber-toothed cats of North America, of course, were the 2 saber-tooths that lived there were doing very well until we got there sometime after 15,000 years ago. So I guess the other thing I wanted to emphasize is that we are simply not. I mean, it's very fashionable to say, well, we're far crueler than other animals, and we're far less caring. As if wolves are somehow caring. That's really not true at all. I mean, look at this guy. I would quote his name and all that, but we live in the electronic age, so you can Google him. He was bitten by a great white shark in California some time ago, and but fortunately not maimed or killed, but injured. And when he recovered, what did he do? Did he join Donald Trump in the drive to kill them all? I wish they would all die. No, he starts a non-profit company for the preservation and protection of great white sharks. Now, Nick, can you imagine a baboon being, attacked by, say, an inexperienced young leopard who doesn't manage to kill him? And he's got terrible cuts, but he manages to get away. And he thinks about it and he thinks, you know what, here in the Western Cape where this happened, there aren't many leopards anymore. I think I'll start a protection society for leopards. No, it is only us that does that, you know. So we have this enormous power of reflection over things and understanding of things. And the challenge that faces us is that this great power of ours has given us, we're still obeying the dictates of the ecology. Raise your children. Don't let your children get sick. Don't let them die. And have enough food in your belly. But instead of being frustrated at every turn by leopards, by disease, by other human beings in a society where there is no 911 to call, we now live in, at least here in North America and in a few other islands of peace in the planet, we live in unprecedented security. That's a nice thing to be. I have spent, you know, so many times in walking in the wilderness of Botswana, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe. It's one of the great pleasures of my life, just the greatest pleasure of my life. But I don't want to live as an active participant in one of those ecologies. I want to be here in my nice city with Whole Foods and a couple of other places where I can go and hunt and gather. You know, that's what I want to do. And so I want to just ask you, I think we should shut it down, Nick. I mean, we can always make another video at another time. Mm-hmm. But like what I'm asking those people who are still maybe listening to us is, go and have a look. I've got 2 chapters in my book. The one is called A Radically Different Faculty, and that tries to examine this intellectual technological magic which was given to us unbidden, unsought, about 2 million years ago, and is the root of all this. And the other is called, I think I called it A Metaphorical New Zealand. When humans first came to New Zealand, they released just a handful, maybe 15, 20, 30 rats out of one of their double-hulled canoes, these Polynesian adventurers that found the place. And New Zealand biologists estimate that those rats in a very short time became billions of rats, because suddenly they had gotten into a place where there were not snakes, eagles, cats, mongooses, and a huge number of other rats to compete with. Suddenly they'd gotten into a place where the compound interest, the geometrical growth that Malthus is so fond of, the geometrical growth of population was theirs to enjoy, and they got numbers in the billions. And we humans, through no fault of our own, have stumbled into a metaphorical New Zealand. I have no solution for anybody about this. I'm like a Japanese spy who discovers in 1943 that the Americans are working on a nuclear weapon. It is not my job to figure out the strategy that Japan, should they negotiate an immediate surrender, should they start a crash program of also building an atom bomb. I am here to tell my listeners, we have an absolutely radical faculty, an absolutely new faculty, which the ecology stood up to everybody's attempts to overthrow it. Everybody had said to the ecology, rage, rage against the workings of the ecology. And it worked fine until we came along with our unbidden and unasked for great power. And now we find ourselves, again, without having asked for it, in a metaphorical New Zealand. I'm grateful that we're in the metaphorical New Zealand. For those of you who are wondering, Nick, by the way, is my son. I'm grateful that I didn't lose you in childbirth or in early birth, in early childhood. And I'm grateful for my life of comparative security, where other people are not trying to kill me and where wild beasts are not trying to kill me. So it's a complex thing I'm telling you, is that I don't want to return to a wilderness ecology, but I want to save the products of the wilderness ecology. And I've got 2 reasons. First is purely sentimental. I'm going to make a whole other video about those sentimental reasons. And the second is that the biosphere cleans our air and water and provides us with a whole lot of things which we absolutely need. And if we continue like this, then we are going to pay a terrible price. So let me deliver this message to you like the Japanese spy to her superiors in Tokyo. She makes it back out of the States. She's in Tokyo. She says, guess what? The Americans are building a terrible weapon. And I'm saying we have a terrible power. I have no idea, it's not my place to say how we can do anything about this. That's all for today.